Hello Paints, that miniature painting coach, and we're back to our miniature vlog, which is the one where I always challenge myself with something new, and especially with this Bretonnian Sorceress, it's really been giving me quite a bit and just pushing it. So these videos are in a longer form, in that I don't actually pause anything, I just go straight and experiment with what I have in my head onto this miniature while building it up to a point where I really want it. So if you're new to the format, this is the main camera. That's the camera where you get to see how my hand movements are and how my painting habits with my brush and my palette. This is the list of brushes and paints. This is my light and shadow reference. This is my color chroma, so you can see what color spectrum that I'm limiting myself within. And well, I mean, let's get back to painting. So last time we were working on I believe it was the dark side of her face and her torso. And so I actually really am tempted to start working on this side of the miniature, dark side, but we really should address this mess. Like, look at this mess. And oh, it's nice, like, so it is a mess. So I'm not even talking about the tassels that she has. I'm talking about that one, her tie. And we're gonna make that into the curvature that we actually enjoy. So let's just go ahead and get started. So this is my wet palette. So if you guys have not seen it before, I use a wet palette that's kind of like on the wide end, but it has depth. So I think it's about like an inch. It's almost an inch tall, and I really like these not so big wet palettes where I just kind of have a few colors and I mix like heck. So the way I save time with my painting generally is I actually have primaries that I have, like over here there's cyans, a yellow and a magenta, and skin tones, because just to save time. And then so I have a gray and then the white, and then a mixed black. So this is an ivory black, but it's been mixed together with I think some cyan inside of it, so it's a little bit on the blue side, and sometimes I add some magenta in there. And then these are some inks of brown, which again this to save time. And the whole point is that I mix directly on my miniatures and I blend almost everything. So that's just kind of how the technique of how I generally approach painting my miniatures. Okay, because you know, if I can just kind of not having to pop on the paint and just kind of go at it, like I can just kind of get it to the detail level of detail that I want. So we're gonna take more of that that teal that we have. We're working again. Oh yeah, here. So we're gonna plop a small little amount on bits and pieces here and there. Namely, we want to actually draw out a shape of her tie. So you want to keep it as nice and curved as possible, right? And we want to make sure that it displays the light. So we're just kind of going in like this. And you know, there's this thing where I want to keep this shape within. So now I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to add yellow, because there's not a lot of yellow in that area, and I'm not quite sure why. I probably missed out on it at the basing stage, because I after basing with white, I basically do a complete undercoat of blends. So we're just gonna draw the shape like this, and then we're gonna blend it with skin tones, so that we can kind of dull it out, that yellow, in such a way so that we can build up the whites later on to a pretty okay effect. So let's just kind of blend that yellow off, take it out a little bit, take it out. Oh, and it's like at the same time we just kind of add that yellow over here, so we get to blend the two legs together so they seem a lot more unified. I realize my pinky is hitting the edge of that palette. So if you don't know me, just to introduce myself real quick. I'm a painter from Southeast Asia, and I have actually not been on social media since 2013, and so everything is pretty new to me. I had spent most of my last few years in life getting off all sorts of junk, like I had to quit smoking, I quit drinking, I quit marijuana, and actually I'm very in deep control of those things now. I wake up pretty early in the morning at like 5:30, and I try and make time to paint every day. So I actually have most of my life in order, and I'm pretty happy about the amount of changes because I am originally an art student, and I've been actually studying art since I was a kid. But the problem was that, well, I mean, it is a perception where I'm from common in my society in Malaysia that art is just not worth anything, and I think it's common among the perception of Asians here to believe that you kind of have to go to a Western country if you want to make art work, and even then, like it's still tough. So generally put, like I make time off to study anything else except for art. So I'm just kind of doing here where I'm making the color changes really softly, and yeah, for the longest time I was like a whole bunch of excuses of not doing art. Now, during that time though, I did a lot of other stuff, and so I'm not really talking about painting today because it's mostly me just stippling on small quick blends. Um, and most of the last few videos, if you really want to know like how I do these things, the last few videos like talked quite a bit about it, and I'll probably create videos to break things down in a way that you can use for your own painting technique and not have to copy mine at all, right? So it's about the smaller painting techniques that you're probably after. So I'll make videos on that at some point in the future, but I want to get this out the way first. So what was I? Oh yeah. So I'm from so being in Malaysia, like everybody here has this effect. It's weird, but basically art you can't really do and achieve much at it, and if you need to, you need to go to a Western country for it, and that's just literally how Asians perceive it. Not all Asians. Like Asia is a pretty freaking huge place, but I'm talking about like Malaysia, and it's like that as even in the metropolis areas, and I don't know how true is that because personally I think the art, as long as it's relevant and it hits an emotional impact with the people, it doesn't really matter where you're from. So if like I did Malaysian art, right, then I actually helped out with the locals and things like that, it would be, and it was something that was, I wouldn't say controversial, but it was relevant at that time that people were trying to solve, then yeah, sure. I mean, people will be more open to the to what I'm doing, but I'm actually for the most part interested in exploring things of taboo, things of like Slanesh, except in the it's portrayed in the ideas of a caricature inside a fantasy caricature, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Western caricature or sci-fi or like any of that, but I do like playing in this realm right now in my life, especially with surrealism. So I am painting miniatures. So while I'll be painting miniatures for most of my life, I think I'll be painting some form of a sculpture or toy because I used to paint Transformers. But anyway, so what was I getting at? Well, I mean, okay, so I'm from Malaysia and I joined started miniature painting actually a long time ago, back in like 2008. I was painting Transformers. I moved over to miniatures at about 2010, and I was painting Dust Warfare miniatures at the time, and I began painting Warhammer Fantasy miniatures at about 2012, and then by 2013 I like just stopped because, well, I mean, I was in college at the time, and you know any something like Western miniature to you guys, I don't know, it might be like $12 or like $60 or whatever, right? And that may seem expensive. For us it's like 3 or 4 times the amount. So kind of like we could essentially buy more McDonald's burgers in comparison than you guys when it comes to buying miniatures. Now that's not the case. Like, it's weird in Asia, especially to do with countries that have Chinese ethnicity inside of it. It tends to be easier to purchase things like technology stuff and stuff that everybody needs. But in terms of like clay, arts and craft stuff, oh my god, like it's just way more expensive here in Asia. Like, for me to buy green stuff, I actually need to pay some, at times like one and a half of what you guys pay, right? If you guys, what I mean by you guys is the people that's in the UK, the people that's in Australia. And Australia, to some extent, also still has to struggle with the pricing amount. But I think for the UK and the guys in America still have it pretty okay. But yeah, Asian, well, our clay basically sucks. We have other alternatives, but just not as good as like green stuff, or rather, I can't remember what's the name for it, but it's there's a really technical name that Games Workshop actually orders their green stuff from another place, another company, I mean. But anyways, coming back to me doing miniature art from Asia, am I liking it? Yeah, really. I always wanted to paint toys and small little sculptures that challenge me. Now, this small, but they are expensive from where I'm from, and it's not like I can just go ahead and move to the US. And however, I've always really been fascinated with the miniature painting scene. So I spent most of my years working my way so I can afford being able to do so. And about the time of the corona, I was like, I mean, a lot of my stuff, other stuff in my life, not necessarily to do with work per se or my family, but most of the social parts were just kind of taken out from it, and I was just like, no, I mean, like, I'm going to finally just not. I've already disciplined my life at that point. Already began exercising, being able to do intermediate fasting and all that. So, I mean, if I already have everything else in control, why not just dive back into miniature painting and just be cautious about conscious about the things I spend, the time the money and the time I spend, and the relationships that I have in the miniature painting community, and why not see how it works out. And for it's actually working out pretty well for me. I opened up a course with some students in it who is solving their own personal problems in miniature painting, and it's most not specifically to do with techniques. I don't coach techniques in particular. I coach how you can learn to create your own techniques and how to teach yourself. So I'm not a teacher. I'm a coach. So I do have art fundamentals in a diploma, and I've been spending most of my life just studying art and buying books and reading and experimenting myself. But working on miniatures is a whole different place because it's a sculpture. That's the first thing. And although I've painted sculptures, it is a tiny sculpture. So now that's that. And it's actually posing all sorts of like nice little challenges that I just love facing. Okay, so we're gonna make sure that we unify the blends at the lake here, because we want to make sure that it feels together, it feels one. So we are going to go at it in small little bits, wet blend it like so, and then pull it all together. So I'm just gonna like, let me see what else is there to me. So yeah, at this point I'm still pretty new to the miniature painting community. I joined up some Facebook groups, start talking about myself a little bit more, things like that. I think some people find me very provocative with the questions that I ask, but really, like, I'm coming from a place where the last communities like I joined were like gaming communities, or like people who like cosplay and stuff like that. So I'm pretty new to miniature painting in the sense that of joining everybody, and I have not I'm not too familiar with things like glazing and stuff like that, like, because I've done digital art, I've done traditional art that was not miniature painting, so I know a lot of other terms, and there's a lot of overlapping of what the same things are being described differently and using different names, but really the basic concept is the same. And so I don't confuse theory with technique. It's just weird to me that you have different names for like the same motion. And like for example, in the green stuff world, they call it paint revitalizer, and in the regular art industry world, we call it paint retarder. What it means is that, so it's the medium in which you add to the binders in paint to slow down the drying process or to it doesn't just slow down the drying process. If a paint is stagnant, it actually activates the paint, so the paint becomes alive, becomes fluid again. So it goes from in a chemical industry, they call it anti-freezing to fluidity, and from the art industry, they call it a retardation, and from the green stuff world, they call it revitalization. But technically, it's basically the same thing. You're just trying to get the paints to not be static. You're getting it to move. Like, that's all it really means. But you have all these different industries like talking about the same thing, that's using different words. So I think where I come from is that when I joined these miniature painting groups and I just like say something and like everyone like, no, it's not what it is. It's like talking about something completely different. And I'm like, I'm physically playing around with the paints and I don't necessarily see how it's all that different. So maybe people kind of understand something that I don't understand. I don't get it, but some people have tried talking to me about it, stuff like that, and it's weird because when I go in, I get inspired by a lot of like Rackham, like Reaper, miniature painters, and the guys like who are on the upper spectrum of like the pros in miniature painting, right? And a lot of them like they have understanding in like art fundamentals, and so they don't necessarily look at it in the same, like they use these words, but they don't necessarily use these words in that like in the way that is defined in miniature painting, rather or the Games Workshop, because like Games Workshop does tend to brand certain types of names. Like I remember like this thing called dry brushing, and dry brushing is called scumbling in the rest of art. Like I'm not the rest of art, but in terms of in painting outdoors, like we call it plein air painting, is when you're painting outdoors, and when you're painting on canvases, the word being used to dry brush is called scrumbling. And I'm not making it up. Like, it's really, you can Google it. James Gurney, the guy who basically does all the illustration for dinosaurs, he talks about it in his videos and things like that. So I'm like, okay, so you have all these names. You don't have to get attached to the names. I mean, like, you can like a way you want to call it, like scrumbling instead of dry brushing. That's completely up to you. I think dry brushing makes it a little bit more definitive, but it also takes away the other movements that you do from dry brushing. And by the way, these words are completely interchangeable, right? So what I'm really talking about in this episode, I guess, is all vocabulary. So, well, if some of you guys don't like me talking about this during my own vlogs, I'm really just talking about to it myself so that I can get it straight in my head that something like scrumbling or dry brushing is a movement that's prevalent inside makeup artists. So in the makeup industry, they use their own names of the same movement. So it's like, what's going on? Like, everybody. So there's tiny little nuances that make it different. Admittedly, very, very different tiny nuances, and I do like those, and I do respect those nuances as an artist. However, I think where the problem is that those nuances and the vocabulary actually end up creating a mental boundary of how you can expand the things that you could apply for your miniature painting in this case, or any of your art, because all these techniques, like I think some people kind of see me how I just kind of go around and just kind of mix these paints together. Well, I mean, it's a gouache technique, right? It's wet on wet, and you just kind of, they call it wet blending in miniature painting, but when you look at people who paint in watercolor and paint in gouache, which is technically the same chemicals as watercolor, it gets complicated. I don't talk about that, but yeah, essentially all you're doing is that I'm taking the methods from gouache or watercolor, and I'm applying it to expanding on that into wet blending, and it's just like, well, what gives. Like if it's all of it at the end of the day, it's just you're just moving color pigments around, and you do it just doing it differently, right? In small little tiny areas, and then we're actually overlapping different kind of skills so that we can get the same effect. Like it, what should only really matter is how it looks at the end. So I have I used to have Asian art teachers, and they'd say this like, look, uh, no matter what people say, or they talk about all these techniques that you should be doing it the right way or the wrong way, the most important thing is how it looks like in the end. You know, nobody is gonna really care about whether you call it dry brushing, or you're gonna call it scrumbling, or you're gonna call it like what I think it's spotting on makeup. I can't remember anymore, but you can call it whatever you want. But really, what just people want to look at the end of the day is something that looks nice. It's really all people care about. Like, if I mean, you be a vocabulary Nazi or whatever people call nowadays, but that doesn't actually help with your painting. Like, it is the okay. Let me rephrase that. Whoa. Take a step back. The vocabulary part helps us in our ability to communicate with among each other as painters to identify a means of learning something, right? But if the terminology is stuck and it's stagnant to a particular wording that is implied, like for example, dry brushing implies that you need to be completely dry, and that's, I would say it's true like 100%. Like they are still a little bit of anti-freezing components that are still left in it. Otherwise, you just won't be able to leave your brush. Your brush will be just too dry. That's why you can't dry brush with a paint that's completely dried up on your brush. It just doesn't work like that. So, you know, if using the word dry brushing, sometimes because of how we think of dryness, it misinterprets, and so you are not able to see how there are more ways to dry brush than not. Does that make sense? So like if like I went over to study a makeup artist and just spend a day watching them work on a at a professional level, I'll go back to dry brushing, and suddenly I'll have all these techniques that I can work and use into my miniature painting, and that's great. Like we shouldn't be like limited in our creativity, uh, unless we're still trying to figure out and learn stuff, but and trying to hone a particular skill for the time being. But and you notice I'm using a lot of buts, it's because there's a lot of rules that don't work well when it comes to creativity like these. So you know you may um you stick to a terminology to completely understand what it has to offer so that you don't confuse yourself. And it might be necessary to. However, it is also as important to find outliers of the same behavior that the word is trying to portray or trying to communicate, so that we can um, add in more knowledge and more tools for us to use that are outside of the boundaries of any axiom or any system that word belongs to. So if it's within the miniature painting scene and it says like, no, you have to call it dry brushing, you don't call it scrumbling, yeah, I'm gonna still look at people who do scrumbling in other art forms and then carry that over. Because if that technique can teach me a new way in order to get something done faster, prettier, and me just being overall more happier with my painting approach and my process, I'm gonna do that. I don't care what anybody says, man. So that's that. Now, oh, I'm actually like just me talking has already pretty much got the shape. So it's like, oh well. I still need to add some magenta in there because I'm not quite happy with how the shape is. So, oh, actually, now I can add magenta in there. Doop 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 doop. There we go. Then we just kind of leave that on our palette. And then we're going to go ahead and add just a little bit with the teal. Just a little bit. Pop, 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 pop. Oh, that magenta is invading. Let's just kind of drop it like so. So yeah, I mean, don't take what I say too seriously. And if you're not in the time yet to implement or like more different types of methods of dry brushing and all that, then don't. Because if you haven't already mastered a specific way of doing something in a world, then if it might feel overwhelming for you in order to explore other stuff. However, if you feel like exploring different things and having all the different questions come at you, and then like being able, oh, okay, so like scrambling is like dry brushing, and then like you kind of see the different patterns in between. Some people learn that way really quick. I tend to be one of those people where I like to compare um, different systems, the way they identify the same things, and then like put them together. So it's rather a lot more easier for me to see what I want and just kind of place them all together. And so this I guess is what I'm trying to say. Um, anyway, so we've kind of painted that, and we've kind of had that nice little. Notice how her clothing has become a lot more lighter, and I really really like that. So we're not that vibrant of a colors as we used to. However, that's actually end up creating a really nice transition for us, because it allows us to play around with her skin in the dense areas where the fabric is kind of touching her skin, so we can actually just go ahead and do that belly now. Now that we have done that overall, I guess my mind was looking at where the highlights are when the clothing just kind of like seeps into her skin. So it's nice. It just kind of naturally went there. I didn't really have to think or plan about it. So much training has already kind of like ingrained into me when it comes to painting with skin colors. Okay, let's just add a little bit more to over here. Okay, and then we want to move that down and out. Okay, and so yeah, I'm not able to paint at display quality so fast yet like some nature painters. Richard Gray, because I really love his artwork, and he paints like really quick. I think you only like need several days. It takes me a while longer than that. So quite a while longer. I think like maybe 20 times longer at least. I don't know. Odd numbers don't exist, not real. Okay, so I'm going to draw this in, and then I'm going to also put this over, because this is where the lights they really need to hit. Right? And then that part is still going to be dark, so we're going to leave that there. And we're going to actually add a little bit of primary cyan. Oh, need to bring our primary cyan a little bit back to life. Okay, there we go. Add that cyan into our darkness, like so. Oops, there's a little bit of paint that's kind of like stuck in there. Okay, and we can see when we zoom out, oh, that cloth is hugging her leg, and it's not smooth yet. Like there's still a lot more to be done. Like you need to add this kind of like teal. Oops, this teal around the corner over here, and a bit like that. Make sure it hugs it, and it goes into the darks. And we're going to actually blend it out a little bit like this, so we still maintain that nice little feminine curvature that kind of seeps in. Let me see, what else do we need to do? We definitely need to define the shadow underneath that. Okay, let's take the time left that's in this video to kind of plan what we want to do next to her. So Right now as it is, let me think. Yeah, and by the way, I'm still deciding on the position of my wet palette, whether or not to kind of have this camera kind of looking at my wet palette all the time or not, because to be frank, like I think looking at hand movement is a lot more important than looking at the wet palette, because after all, I'm mixing most of my paints just directly on anyways. Let me see. So this part is still not yet done. That lighting is not accurate, so we need to put it a little bit off, just a little bit, and then we need to keep working it and pushing it into the darks. So this shape needs a little bit more tweaking. Okay, and we'll probably work on the bottom of the dress, because this part needs to be bright as well. It shouldn't be this dark, because they are catching light. Let me see what else. How bright should this part be? It definitely should need to be a little bit at the bottom here, and then after that you need to darken the ones at the top a little bit. And let me see where else. This part, I think the colors actually work fine. I just need to blend it into the brightness a little bit to show off that different coloring. Okay, so yep, that's what we're looking at. That's what we're gonna work for. Okay, so remember to learn from others, so to discover more of yourself, all right? And take care.